starting. Hello, everyone. We had technical difficulties this morning, at least little Martha did. We lost Blog Talk Radio right as we went on the air, and we were late with everything. So anyway, hello. I hope all of you all are doing well. You're listening to a show called Real Talk with Martha Novak, who can't seem to get her act together this morning. Actually, I don't know what happened. We just, all of a sudden it was there and then it was gone. We're talking about emotional intelligence today, and I'm so glad to be with you. Let's do a prayer and launch into some of this information, okay? This is the fourth part of a series. I hope we're going to finish today. If not, we'll run over until next week. Hopefully we'll finish today. And it's been a good series, you know. I think that much is batted around about emotional intelligence, but nobody seems really to know what it is. And I have just been delighted to talk to you about this because it makes the world better when we change individually, doesn't it? All right, let's do a quick prayer, pull us all on the same page, and then I'll launch into this. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are and all everything is in this world, we thank you so much for being here together under the banner of knowing you, of discovering ourselves, and it's all one thing. We are the energy of you. We use it to higher or low degrees, depending on whether we're in the ego child's mind or the highest self mind, but it's all you in high and lower vibrations. It's a perfect system. We understand that. And everyone is looking for some of the same things. Love and happiness and joy, and the ability to thrive in the world. We ask that everyone be blessed with this today, and that they open whatever is in them to this, that they may have more enriching life experiences and what they want. We now say, in all humbleness, we are grateful for everything, and we know nothing, for it is the you through us and through all things that know it all. And we open ourselves to this part of us. Thank you so much, dear God. We open to the truth that lies in your enlightenment, and we say it's so, and so it is. Amen. Yay! Okay, kids. So, we were talking about an article here for the last several weeks. 5 Emotional Intelligence Skills. This is by Kendra Cherry. Just like the fruit. And what I said last week is true. Emotional intelligence and the wording for it and playing around with what the heck this is was first written about in 1964 by Michael Beldock. It was mentioned again in 1966 by somebody named B. Lunar. And then Daniel Goleman picked all this up in 1995 and wrote the most famous book for emotional intelligence, a very good one at that. So in this article, just to catch us up quickly, the 5 key emotionally intelligent skills are self-awareness, self-regulation, social skills, empathy, and motivation. We went through all of those, or some of them, half of them last week, and 2 weeks before that, before I had to take a break from the show. And now what I've pulled for you is finishing up this particular article, but then I found another couple of articles that say little different things. One is 10 subtle signs someone has low emotional intelligence. That's Isabel Tenorio. I am not one bit striking the hand of anybody that has anything to work on. No, that's not what this show is about. What this show is about is pointing out some things, however subtle, that we may be doing that is in our best interest to change. You know, I've had all sorts of people come to me through the years to work with me. I remember one man who, God bless him, was an out-and-out thief. He was a gambler, and he cheated. And he was very upset because he thought I would judge him. And I said, no, I'm going to do everything in my power to show you that that's not a good idea and move the energy out that makes you want to do that. And, we'll help you be stronger. And indeed, we did. Not only did he give up cheating, but he gave up gambling completely, didn't find it interesting anymore. So I'm never judging our issues. I'm particularly not judging our issues because anybody who tunes into a show like this or comes to me in sessions, hello, Dahlia, good morning, darling, wants to change. We all want to change for the better. Believe it or not, we want to get closer to who we are, which is our God self, and be authentic and real. So you bet I applaud anyone who is courageous enough to do the work, And I'm only putting ideas like, here are some examples of low emotional intelligence. I don't care how articles are written. I want you to know I'm just looking for the nugget of information to present to you and for us to talk about. There's another that I'm going to talk right after that about 18 signs you have high emotional intelligence. So all I'm wanting to do in a show like this is put some things on the table. We'll discuss how to change these things if it is something we want to change. And I want you to pat yourself on the back when you're doing, when you're doing things that are in keeping with your ascended self. So there we are, okay? Sometimes I think I need to explain things like that because many times I have had clients in the past, not so much now, but in the past where they'll say, I'm really trying to force them out of a behavior that is detrimental to them in some way. And so I can get quite adamant. Yes, as a matter of fact, Dahlia just shared to be closer to who we really are. That's exactly right. I have a little kitty, Schnitzel the cat, who loves to come and be on the air with us, and that's what he thinks he's going to do right now. You can't come, Shani, I'm sorry. All right. So I think it's very important for us to, hello, good morning, Sheila. I'm so glad that all of you all are tuning in, and this cat is trying a different approach now. So if you see me doing this, that's why. He's the one that always comes and has to be part of these sessions. So it's so funny. I think it's, I've seen for years people who come to me for help. And yet, when I push to help them, they go, oh, I feel like you're scolding me. And it's interesting because it's an ego device. I'll bring the cat on. Well, he'll be back. He's, are you coming, Schnitzel? Come here. Everybody wants to see you. All right, here we go. So this is Schnitzel the cat. And he's a good, healthy, wonderful boy. And the poodle is sleeping behind me. I constantly have to sit on the edge of my chair because of the poodle and because of the cats, by the way. They get back there. All right, going back. All right, Toffel. Going back to what I was just saying, I'm really never scolding. I'm not. I might be pushing to open you up, pushing to see how far I can poke you and what you're going to say in response to me, which gives me energy and information for me to do the actual energy work to change one energy from to another that is in more in keeping. Oh, thank you, darling. That is more in keeping with your highest self. I'm moving energy over here. So your ego child's mind kind of has it set up, you know, all of you is calling for help, and your highest mind, and good morning, Barbara, darling. It's so nice to have you on board. The ego child's mind is reacting as you did when you were a child, even to good information, you see. So part of what I can do for you is also kind of poke a little bit in our private sessions to see how you're going to react. I'm a little provoker, if you will, to see how you're going to react, to see, you know, how stuck you are. Obviously, if you want help, the highest self in the ego child's mind wants help, and yet when you're being helped, the ego child's mind says, oh, but you're fussing at me, you're scolding at me, you're judging me. Drama, number one. And number two, I've got to find those reasons that you're reacting that way so we can just go on into the higher thought. You understand? So, you know, this is a very complicated procedure. I've got to always find whatever the bottom line is. The bottom line might be some sort of resistance. And Dahlia says, it's hard to change. The ego would react and try to keep us stuck. You're absolutely right. The ego does react. I call it the ego backlash, you know. It goes, ooh, I want to change, but not that much. Or, ooh, it's deep, too deep, you know. Dahlia says she loves the packing method. And I assume, Dahlia, you mean the layers. I mean, we layer, don't we? We can't just let the incident happen. Like you turned down, you went to turn off the radio and you ran into the car in front of you. It can't just be a moment of stupidity, you know. You have to go into a lot of drama about all sorts of things. And, oh, you know, I always do stupid things. Oh, my God, you know, my mother always told me I was going to be a failure and do stupid things. My dad told me I was never watching and always unconscious. And you're going to layer all this stuff on instead of it just being about one stupid little moment that we all have. You see? That's what I interpreted packing to mean, that we are layering things that are really not beneficial. And it's interesting because when you do consciousness work and you're taking off those layers and you're taking off those reactions, you know, you're just left with how you feel in that moment. That's mindfulness. But people that throw that word around and say, be more mindful, are just creating a problem out there in society, because society can't do it until nobody can do this until you've done some work on yourself and removed where your mind goes in a knee-jerk reaction, which are the issues, you see. So we become more mindful, and it becomes ultimately just about that moment of stupidity, nothing else. And it's a terrific relief. And that's why I think people for eons have been studying consciousness in some way or another, you know. So, going back to why emotional intelligence skills are important. Let's talk about that for a minute. We talked about some of this last week. We mentioned emotional intelligence allows you to be a more effective leader. I believe I told you the story of how many times I go into corporate America and, you know, I'll directly ask the CEO or the executives, so you're friends with the people you work with? And they go, oh, no, I'm the boss. I can't have my authority challenged. Guys, you're not a real authority if that's the way you feel about it. That's a wannabe. And that's what I'm supposed to do, is to put that on the table for these people. That's wannabe authority. Let's move you into actual authority, which is, by the way, where the authentic self is. People do not challenge authority when it's a real authority. They challenge fake authority every time. Look at society in this world. We don't like fakeness. Hello, Becky. Well, honey, that's perfectly fine. I tuned in late too. We had some technical problems this morning. So here we are together. Not a problem in the world. Glad you're here, sweetheart. Look at the world. The society, as a world society, doesn't like people who lie. We don't like people to deceive us. We really turn on people like that. The more we're devoted to them, when we find out they're fakes or deceptive in some way, wow, we turn against. That's why so many Hollywood stars are, I'm looking at this, God bless him, the Johnny Depp, Amber Heard stuff. Sounds like two people that need some emotional intelligence, but that's just me from the outside. But I look at that and I think, they don't know how to handle emotion. Real important to be the authentic self, know when to let things go. I would hope that all of you that might be single find someone, if you are going to have a relationship, who absolutely doesn't give lip service, but puts their life behind the fact that love is a privilege. Because I think that my husband and I do this. And when we have any kind of little tiff, if we just remind ourselves or each other that, wait a minute, where is love in this thing that we think is so upsetting us? We can drop it. We resolve it, of course, not just drop it and sweep it under the rug. We resolve it in ourselves and go on. I wish that for you. Really, I do. Okay. So, being an effective leader has to do with knowing who you are. Can't have low self-esteem with that, by the way. So if you've got it, that's something to work on. Because this has got to be a pretty clear channel between you and your ascended God that you are, so that you can work and live and dialogue from that place in truth, not pretending. It's interesting because your outside world is going to tell you exactly what mind you're in, even if you don't recognize it to begin with. Isn't that interesting? It's the most amazing thing. Whoever you're fussing with is going to show you right back that you're in the ego child's mind by their annoyance with you, anger at you, whatever. But if you're in the higher self mind, you all are just going to work out a solution. It happens all the time. As a matter of fact, I want to tell you, as a corporate coach, I'll send people into very difficult situations. Oh, I was going to say something about Johnny Depp, and what I was going to say is he's obviously being coached to be so honest. He's trying to be honest. He's saying some very hard stuff out there. I haven't heard Amber Heard yet. So, well, anyway, it's very important that we become who we really are, and all of us are those marvelous authorities of ourself. Of ourself. Not of the company, not of your team, not of anything else, of yourself. Focus on the work here. All right, moving on. Second note in this article was understanding how others feel. Our feeling allows you to communicate with them better. Yeah, this is where empathy comes in. This is where asking how they feel. I can't tell you how many people assume or try to talk you out of your feelings. If you had a mother or father that said, you don't feel that way, you feel this instead, they were wrong. Nobody can tell anybody else how they feel, okay? We can ask, how are you feeling? You're completely trapped, though, if you don't have an emotional vocabulary. If you can't describe how you're feeling, good luck with that. And that's all the more frustrating. And that makes somebody standing on the outside that cannot reach you guess, which is presumptive. It's presumptuous. It really is. It's unkind. It's insulting sometimes. But it's often done, certainly out of their issues, but it's also sometimes done because they can't reach any other way. So it's really important to give yourself that emotional vocabulary like we talked about in other shows. And it's very important. All of us, guys, all of us from time to time always think of ourselves. There are times and moments in everybody's life where it's just all about you. That's okay. But is most of it about you, or is all of it about you? That's not okay. And it's very important to start opening up the empathetic thing. Now, how do you do that? Well, let me put this on the table. I'm going to say a word that if you have not done work on yourself makes you go, whoa! And that's vulnerability. You have to be vulnerable, because vulnerability in the ego child's mind is scary as hell. You're going to be hurt. You're a victim. Vulnerability in the ascended mind is not that at all. It's a rapport with all life. It's a rapport with all life. I have felt that way from time to time. I can't possibly know how you're feeling, but I know a part of it because this happened to me. I think it's an extremely important thing as we're trying to come out of the ego child's mind where it's all about us and indulging in it being all about us and going into the higher self-mind. It's very important to know what you're talking about. And what I mean by that is this. You've heard me say this on other shows too, but I think it bears repeating, and I want to go a step further. Are you describing a situation? Are you talking about yourself? Or are you talking about, is the story about somebody else? Whatever it's about, it's nice to keep it that way for a while and not draw it back to yourself every time. Because that's what narcissists do. It's all about us. And we draw it back every time. We may disguise it and say, oh, poor you, but we don't really mean that. And we also project onto other people what we're feeling. It's another form of narcissism. And of not wanting to know what they feel. They may take us somewhere we don't want to go. You see? There is communication, just giving information, and there's the art of communication, and that's knowing who you're talking with. What they can take of you and what they can't. Everybody can't take everything. And when you find somebody who can, you've got a good one. You got a true friend. Okay? All right. Moving along, her next point is knowing more about what you're feeling allows more self-awareness and to understand yourself more deeply. Yes, I can't emphasize this enough. I agree with that. Again, I strongly suggest printing out an emotional vocabulary sheet. All the emotions that exist in the world fall under two things, fear and love. That sheet that you're going to look at, you're going to print out, that has all the words, all the emotions that ever existed, find a long one, will fall under those two things. And, by the way, may fall under both, depending on whether it's used in the lower mind, the ego child's mind, or the higher mind, right? I mean, for example, love. Love's a wonderful emotion. It can mean uh, a real negative context. It can mean that I need you because I don't have a sense of self. That's what people call love. And it also can mean the kind of love that we're talking about here, that is all of who you are as the ascended mind. So that goes under both fear and love, you see. It depends on how the individual uses it. I think anger can go under both. What do I mean by that? Anger, your ego child's mind is afraid of anger, is fearful of anger, is angry about anger. Okay. But I've known people that get angry and get angry in a wonderful way. From a higher self way. They just simply tell the truth. They say, wait a minute, you're stepping over the line there. And that's fine too when it's done in love. You know, even though this is a radio show, my dears, I do try to challenge you as much as possible on a radio show like this. And I hope you understand I'm doing it out of love. I hope you understand that. Because that's where I'm coming from in a session and everything. My job is to prod and to push and to see what you're doing and how you're reacting and help you get past the limitations and into the higher mind. So I'm going to do that. But one of the reasons we can talk about hard things is because I really care about you and I want you to have a good life. Why wouldn't I want that for you? I want that for all of us, right? The lists that I keep referring to of emotion are extremely important because you've got to know how you're feeling before you can be aware of your emotions that are either feeding your higher self mind or indulging your ego child's mind. It's going to be one of the first things that you work on with me is knowing which mind you're in. The ego child's mind is always fear-based. You can call it anything you want. I had a man that came to me, and he's still with me, but he is very, very angry at a family member, but this family member gave him a lot to fear. So it's really fear more than anger. But anger is more appropriate for a big, strong He-Man, right? So that's where he used to stop. If you don't have an emotional vocabulary, you can't watch these things. You can't watch which mind you're in. Ego child's mind, fear-based, self-indulgent, all about you at the expense of anybody else, all about them at the expense of you, which makes you a victim, which you focus on, your victimhood, so it still is all about you. Okay. Higher self-mind, love-based. A love that is not a love between people, the way society understands it, but a real love because that's all you are. That's your energy in the highest self. Oh, of course, we have love for different people. I love my dog differently than my husband, differently than the boater that's out there on the lake right now. But I'd like to think I have the same loving attitude. It's just different kinds of love. I think a lot of people that are standing outside looking in and who have not gotten what they need in the ego child's mind really can't see those distinctions. Why? Because they just need love. They just want the attention. The truth of the matter is we're much bigger than we allow ourselves to be sometimes. And you've got a great love inside of you that is really who you are. So to start yourself on growth, and you keep in mind the path to enlightenment is through awareness, consciousness to enlightenment. And awareness comes first. So you've got to be aware of what you're feeling and what you're saying to yourself and what you're doing. And it isn't so much, oh, I'm going to take this course or I'm going to call this person. No, it's what's the motivation underneath? You're afraid to be left behind? Well, that's an ego child's mind reason. You want them to do something for you and you want to be sneaky about it and pretend you care about them? That's an ego child's mind reason. This isn't judgment. This is what we all do until we don't. You get it? Of course you do. So self-awareness, knowing how you feel, knowing what your motivations are underneath, and working on yourself until you are completely, or as completely as you can become, emotionally honest. Oh, I can't even begin to tell you how important those two words are, emotional honesty. They're extremely important for all of us. Emotional honesty was really hard because a lot of people don't want to admit they have these bad feelings. That's their word, not mine. These bad, dark feelings. And everybody has them. So you're just wearing a mask, kids, until you say, let's drop that crap and let's just be ourselves, light and dark, good and bad, everything. Let's put our arms around the whole blooming thing. Now you've got the energy at your disposal, and now you can make an accurate choice. You see, when you're in the ego child's mind, you just have a knee-jerk reaction. You don't have a choice. You're just reacting. There's a difference between reaction and choice. In the higher mind, you have a choice in each and every moment. And if that's not freedom, I don't know what it is. Our next point is, by being more aware of your emotions, you can also improve your self-control abilities. And of course, self-control, self-regulation is what's called, is part of emotional intelligence. It's extremely important to know what you're motivated by. Number one, what are you motivated by? Really, truly, in your heart of hearts. By the way, don't fool yourself. It's never about, I don't want the other person to feel bad. I'm making a joke of this because I hear it all the time. You don't care about that other person, not at the bottom line. At the bottom line, you don't want to handle it yourself. You don't want to feel bad. Why isn't that all right? That's human. And we can't get to these bottom line motivations until we're honest with ourselves, and on that level of our issues, it's all about us at its base. It's never about our sparing someone else. It's about our sparing ourselves. Now, that's honesty. Thank you, Denise. That's honesty. You've got to be emotionally honest, my darlings. You've got to learn to be. Does it make you any less of a person? Only in your own mind, you see, because you've got some issues to work out that says, I'm lesser. You're not lesser. You've never been lesser. You've never been wrong. You've been human. Why isn't that all right? The truth is, it is. It's the opening to your divinity. Don't you understand? It truly is. The esoteric journey is that these things hide in things that are often opposite. Your divinity. This wonderful spiritual being in physical form lies in the acceptance of all of your humanness and letting it be finally all right. That's where to start. But what do? We push things away. We push big chunks of our energy away and deem them unacceptable. Well, I'm not emotionally honest yet. I'm going to not look at that. I'm going to push that away because I don't want to see that part of myself. I want to think better of myself. Don't you understand, darling? It is in the act of doing that actually is fueling the low self-esteem. You're actually using issues now that give you the opposite of what you want. Every time you use an issue, you're proving to yourself you need to use the issue. What? That's how entrenchment happens, a deepening of it in your psyche. You see? What's the point of that? We need all of the energy back, the light and the dark, what you've deemed good and bad. It's all of us. It's us as a whole person. It's us as the being of God we are, the aspect of God we are. And when you say, well, I'm not a good creator, I can't seem to get what I want in life, maybe you're not using all of your energy. Maybe it's being divided up in all these ways. You see, if you're pushing your energy away because you're not acceptable in this arena, or that, if your hips are too wide and your nose is too whatever and your hair is too white and it's just bull. Because you were born with everything. But these ideas of self are in the way. And once you get them resolved in you, they're not going anywhere. You see, this is what I think people don't understand. You're going to always have the ego. The ego created the ego child's mind. You're not going to always have the ego child's mind. These things are part of the mind, not the ego that's supposed to give you a sense of before, during, and after. It's part of the mind, the mindset. And in that ego child's mind, there is no time. So you act the same way you did when you were 3. Not in the emotional intelligence way, because all of your energy is back and you've got loads of options. You realize the way you could have been at one time. And you're going to do something else now. Yeah, indoctrination of beliefs, of distorted lies. Thank you, Jay. That's lovely, the way you said that. These are cognitive distortions we have about our world. Go back, please, and listen to that radio show. And if you want me to do it again, I am delighted to get my notes out on cognitive distortions, and we'll talk from that. Because, guys, these are cognitive distortions. The way we see the world. You see, when we were little, we didn't have a developed sensibility and a developed brain. So when we see something repeating itself, and it makes its appearance that way over and over and over again, that's how we form our cognitive distortions. If our fathers are always way too busy for us to look at our homework, to brag on us, to come to our school plays or anything else, we say something's wrong with us. Why? Because it's all about us in the ego child's mind. You understand? You're not going to say, oh, well, he's just overworked and he's got an issue with being overworked and trying to prove himself and trying to be valuable, so he doesn't have, you see. No, we just say, I'm not good enough. And that creates then, you're working yourself to death as an adult, trying to be valuable to that father who never gave you that attention, or you're going to implode because you're never going to get it. And you're going to take jobs that are far lesser, and you're never going to develop yourself, because what's the point? You're never going to get that man's attention. Now, I'm making it very simplistic, but this is how we get into the states that we are. Okay, Becky is saying she would love someday for me to revisit cognitive distortions. Why don't we do that next? As soon as we finish with our emotional intelligence stuff, that'll be the next thing I give you. I think that's a good idea. You know, a lot of times, guys, even though I'm talking about the same subject, there's going to be something different in it. I'll tell you different stories. We'll go different places with it. So I never worry about pulling, aren't you? Thank you, Becky. I never worry about pulling old material out and redoing it. And I think it's very powerful, quite frankly. Really, I do. That subject. All right. Her next point is Managing your emotions effectively allows you to exert greater control in situations marked by stress and conflict. Yes, as a matter of fact, yes. You have got to learn to manage your emotions. Now, how do you do that? We'll talk about how to do that. I want to give you an example first. So, some clients that come to me are terribly afraid of conflict. But guys, conflict's part of life, isn't it? Conflict actually can be very beneficial done the right way because it gets all the cards on the table. Sometimes at its best, because it can not be at its best, as you know. It can be emotional truth-telling where all the cards are put on the table so you all can work out a solution from this point on. It isn't about who did what to whom in the past. It isn't about that at all. It's about here's the situation. We have a different philosophical take on this. What are we going to do about it in the future that we can agree on? That's how to handle a conflict, guys. If you are just going to argue, if because you think you are so wrong, you have to be right all the time, you're going to have to work harder than somebody else because you are, what? Layering. You're layering. Instead of just saying, I have to be right all the time, I have to control every situation, I'm doing it with my ego child's mind, show me all the ways I'm doing it so I can stop it, and help me want to stop it. Here comes Schnitzel again. Hi, darling. Instead of doing that, we layer. And dears, this is where emotional honesty comes in, where we go, look at what I'm doing. And this is where having a trusted therapist or confidant or someone who is not going to support that behavior, but who's going to not judge you for it either, and is going to understand why you're doing it and help you find the solutions underneath and why you're motivated to do what you do and give you different solutions energetically that'll come, by the way, out of you. Now we're talking about a better way of doing things. Something, and when I talk about better, I'm not giving you a value judgment there. Perhaps I ought to explain myself there too. There are things that we're thinking, feeling, and doing that are supportive of the love that we are in our highest selves. And there are things we are thinking and feeling and doing that are just validating the ego and the ego child's mind. That's what I'm talking about. I'm interested in taking those things and putting those things to bed, taking the sting out of them, taking the energy out of them. Believe it or not, if you have an issue, what I'm doing over here is trying to take the energy out of it anymore. I'm trying to resolve it. We do a lot of talking around it, some cognitive work, but we're trying to take the energy out of it. Over a period of time, the energy goes out of it so you can board with that subject. It's resolved, in other words, in the nervous system. In other words, you're not going to have a knee-jerk reaction anymore. You've got something else. You see it in a larger context. Okay, I used to do that. I've got, though, other things I can do now. And we inevitably choose those other things because they're more love-based than the ego child's mind and being in fear. We're all tired of being in fear. That's why you even listen to a show like this. Danny says, Carol Burnett and I should be sisters. Oh, well, that would be nice. That would be lovely. I'm a big admirer of hers. I think she's a very sweet woman. Saw her live and in person when she came with her tour a number of years ago because my husband, who is Austrian, had never seen her show and didn't know anything about the Carol Burnett phenomenon back, in our youth. So I took him to see her, and she was so lovely and such a beautiful woman and such a loving spirit that he was a fan too. So that's how we go back. But I don't know her. Wish I did. Okay. So having emotional intelligence certainly has huge advantages, not the least of which is you have empathy for people around you. And I want to talk about that for a minute. I mentioned this last week, but I'm going to mention it again. If you're one of these overly sensitive people, and I don't mean that in any critical way, because I used to be this as well, where we just feel for everybody, we've got to get out this oversympathetic issue with you. Because the fact of the matter is, you can help when you can't when you can't. We can continue and pray for people, but if part of us is being lost in somebody else's life, in somebody else's problems, we don't yet know, and here's a subtle way, we do not self-regulate. We've got to learn to do that. Why? By getting over our oversympathetic issues. All right? We can't be overly, we can be sympathetic, we can be empathetic. That's a very nice quality to have, but appropriately so. And an oversympathy is inappropriate. An oversensitivity is usually part of that. So when we talk about empathy and you say, oh, I just cry all the time for my friends, everybody tells me their problems. Well, they shouldn't. Excuse me? Do you think I'm patient with people out in public at a public gathering coming and telling me their problems? No, I'm not. I'm off. And you need to be too. There are some of us that have never learned energetically to turn off and give ourselves a rest, and then turn back on and help, and turn off and give ourselves a rest, and turn back on. And if you want to know more about that, please go to my website, get the DVDs, download the DVDs on called the It series, because that's going to tell you how to do it. The deeper you go into all this, the more you give up egoic control. And guys, if you think you're going to be conscious and enlightened with egoic control, let's get real. It ain't going to happen. I'm going after it. You should want to go after it yourself. Egoic control is one of the big things that blocks us. It comes out of fear, of course. I understand that. So what takes its place? What takes its place is when you are more and more living in the highest self. It's like the only thing that I can describe it as is it's like you have a phone line to your guides or to God, or however you want to say. It's all the same thing on the other side, to your highest self, all the same thing. But here's an open phone line, and when they have something to tell you, they do. And we have to be awake enough, aware enough to go, message. In my opinion, when it's a higher self message, I don't think any of it's coming from me. I think it's all coming from my guides. I'm aware sometimes of hearing some of the things I teach you at the very same time. It's coming out of my mouth. Are we going to be in the higher or the highest mind, or in the ego child's mind? That's really what this comes down to. I'm wanting you to build momentum in the highest mind, because so many of our issues drop away there. There, everything is all right. And if you go, everything isn't all right, look, this, and this are wrong with my life. If you're saying that, all of those things, you can't think of anything else that isn't an ego child's mind issue. So it's a really good way of saying, woo, look what mind I'm in. Because everything's all right in the higher mind. And you're really listening and you're really tuning in, and you may hear nothing and proceed. But if you hear somebody telling you to do this, do that, think of this. Look at what you're doing here. If something's presented to you, that's a wonderful thing, because then we can change it. You see? Or you'll know where to go, what to do. So let's talk about, for a moment, before we move on to these other things, how you can improve self-awareness. Self-awareness. The first thing that strikes me, and again, I go off text a lot, I'm sorry, but that's just what I'm supposed to do. Before you have self-awareness, you have to have a self. Before you have self-awareness, you have to have self. Now, you don't have to have all sense of self. You can start that and have some self-awareness and some more sense of self, and they can build together. But so many people don't have a clue about where to start because inside they've buried their sense of self. Nobody can take it away from you guys. That's just blooming ridiculous. You buried it. You buried it where nobody can find it, not even you, because you didn't want anybody to take away that. And as a matter of fact, a lot of these issues that we have are to protect a weak sense of self, like the control issue that I mentioned. You wouldn't be controlling if you didn't need to protect that sense of self. So it doesn't mean it's very strong and viable to begin with, you see? So we've got to do some work there on getting you strong. So many times, what I always do when I start sessions with people is I start out saying, the first 2 hours are nothing but I want to know who you are. I want to know who the players were in your early childhood home. I want to know what their relationship to each other was and the relationship to you. I want to know the traumas that have happened in your life. I want to know everything. Your childhood experiences at school, at home, when and if you were beaten, spanked, the worst thing that you can remember, the best thing that you can remember, who the safe parent was, who the villain was. Many times, in the work, there's surprises along the way. Let me give you an example. Most people will hand me a villain right away. Oh, my father was an asshole. He was just, he drank and he had a terrible temper and we were always afraid of him, and mother told us to be afraid of him and she'd rush us out of the house. And then you realize, after you do quite considerable amount of work on yourself, that the person you're not giving up, the mother, is the real mentally ill one and even created some of that behavior in the father. You see? We're a big surprise down there. We just are. But what if you could be free of all of it? And I say you can. You can. So, we need to build the self and then the self-awareness together with building the self. There's an esoteric statement for you. Remember, it goes from awareness to consciousness to enlightenment. That's the energetic pathway. So what happens when you say, I don't know what my issues are? Well, I say, most of the time it's perfectly natural. You don't know what your issues are until you do. When they start coming up and when you're ready to open the mind and actually see them, that's the start of your wonderful path. And there are people that don't ever want to know. And I say, why isn't that all right? They have a different life path than the ones of you that are listening to a show like this. That's all. And we can't make another believe or do what we're doing. That's not fair. That's not nice. Everybody has a right to live and die the way they choose. this article goes on to say, in improving self-awareness, ask for constructive feedback. I don't like that statement because what the ego child's mind always does is goes find someone exactly like them, tells the other person their trouble, and they go, you're right, you're absolutely right, and that gets us nowhere. That's why a therapist is a good choice. Someone very neutral that doesn't have a dog in that fight, that can say, well, here are the two minds. Here's what you're doing here. Here's what you're doing there. And yet doesn't tell you you're wrong. You see, it's really important for us to validate the fact. You ready for this? Because this is a validation for you. My God, you're trying, aren't you? You're listening to a show like this. Do you think half the people you know would listen to a show like this? Oh, no, thank you. It's not for me. So good for you. You're willing to be challenged. I'm delighted by that. That's courage. It's real courage. So for God's sake, pat yourself on the back. So I'm all for your seeking constructive feedback, but seek it from people that are kind and loving. And you know, if you go to somebody who's going to slam you for being wrong or being this or being selfish or being this or that, that's not helpful. And I'll tell you why. Because the cells of your body, the most fundamental part of you, go toward pleasure and away from pain. This is because you started out as one molecule. One little molecule. I haven't discussed this in a long time, so I might as well do it now. Thank you, Becky. When you start out, you are one cell. That's what I want to say. One cell. A lot about growth and change comes into that one cell, and that's considered stress. Starts vibrating. They've even observed the vibration under a microscope. And what happens in that vibration is the cell is either going to collapse and die, or it's going to divide into two. This is how you're here. More of you divided than died. You see? At our fundamental bottom line, we're going toward pleasure and or pain because of the cellular experience. Dying is considered painful. And dividing and going on is considered pleasurable. So what if you are just criticizing yourself all the time? If there's a lot of judgment about yourself, if you're saying you're always wrong, if you go to somebody else and you're trying to get constructive feedback and they say, I just think you're one of the most selfish people I've ever met. I don't like you. Nobody likes you to do. Really? You think you're going to do anything with that? I think you're going to do something. I think you're going to avoid it. I think you're going to be sorry you did spiritual work. But of course, that wasn't spiritual work. You consulted the wrong people, to tell you the truth. Certainly keeping a journal, she says, is good, and perhaps that is good, As a writer, I don't keep a journal. I keep notes. I keep things to write about. I have a very active internal life. At one point, I've kept journals here and there. The interesting thing about journaling is this. I'm not so much interested in writing about my personal growth. I'm more interested in assimilating it and using it now. That's what I'm interested in. If you're using a journal to hide in, not a good use. If you're using a journal to remind yourself, to assimilate these things in your life, better use. She recommends learning new skills, and so do I. I love the reinvention of self. Now, that doesn't mean you have to change your work every 5 years. That's not what I'm talking about. But you do have to grow and learn and become, all you can be. I know that when I started out as a child, I was a child actor. I sang, I danced, poorly, by the way, with that latter one, dancing. I took ballet. I learned it. Tap dance. I was never very good at it. Still did it. Played the piano. My mother was a French teacher, spoke a little French. I went to a regular college. I went to an acting school. I studied when I got out at theaters that I could act in and study with. I taught. Great way of absorbing these things into yourself that you're learning. And one of the things I think is so interesting is how we just continue to learn. For example, in my first book, my first fiction book, it's not on the market yet, by the way, but in my first fiction book, I took a year and a half off to learn to write. I realized I wasn't writing the way I wanted to write. I didn't know anything about fiction, and that I thought naively I could just start. And the interesting thing is I did just start. That was great. I just started. But then I realized I love this. I want to learn as much as I really can and be valuable. Second book. Okay. Third book. That's wonderful. Becky said, learning from womb to tomb. It's the best. I like that. We have to keep learning. We have to keep growing. We have to keep expanding ourselves. And here's the interesting thing. Every time we do this, every time I'm talking to you on a Sunday morning, and every time I have any of you in private session, you are experiencing all of me, because I use every single bit of that I'm talking about now. It's all available. It's like I have the world of files in me that have been my life, and I pull them out as we go and offer them to you. You understand? Don't be afraid to learn something and to fail. Oh my God, some of our most wonderful learning experiences are when we fail miserably. And did we really fail if we learned something? Absolutely not. Nobody remembers it but us, huh? She also recommends meditation. I think meditation is wonderful. I've been meditating for years. However, meditation alone is not going to get you to consciousness and enlightenment. It just won't happen. It'll get you beyond your issues in the moment, but you're going to pick them up when you finish. Meditation is extremely important because it gets you into your lower brainwave states, and that's a much more creative state. It's much more aware when you are in alpha, theta, and delta states and not in beta. But it isn't everything. You have to, it's just one of the tools along the way, you see. I know, I'm thinking of a man years ago that I had as a client. And he was a reformed drug addict. And he had studied, I don't remember what form of discipline, meditation-wise, but something. As I recall, he was Asian. Or maybe he wasn't Asian. I don't remember what his nationality was. He was fascinating. He was perfectly beautiful. A beautiful man. But he couldn't understand, I might as well go to what I'm trying to say. He couldn't understand how he needed to raise his energy to be a presence in his life in the moment. He couldn't resolve that with the peace that he found in really low energy in meditation. And try as I might, because he was a former drug addict, nobody had ever worked on his fear. And he wasn't, by the way, coming to me for that. As I recall, he was in an acting class. And he simply couldn't do both. And I want to say, you're supposed to be able to do both. You're supposed to have the peace within, raise your energy level, be in peak performance. That's what peak performance is. A high level of energy with all the nerves and anxiety removed. A love-based energy. It's supposed to go together. And you'll understand more of this, I think, if you listen to those DVDs, the It series. She goes on to say, pay attention to your thoughts and emotions. I think we've covered that enough, don't you? Pursue your passions. I say so many people have given up what they love for one reason or another. People give up what they love because their spouses can't share it with them, because it seems weird to other people, because tradition doesn't allow it, or the norm doesn't allow it. Guys, for God's sake, pursue what interests you. These are, I want you to develop, going past her article, balance points. Again, balance points are things that make you you, that you cannot give up, or you wouldn't be you anymore. I love people and animals. I am an introvert. I need my private time. I am creative to the max. There's no way I can turn it off. I see everything creatively, including television shows, everything else. Because of my theater and film background, I'm looking at what the director's doing and the actors are doing and how well it's written and whether it's psychologically holding steady. Man, I'm fascinated if something's good. I don't have any tolerance for it if it's not. I love nature. Love nature. I find it all fascinating. I love words. Guys, if you took any of those away from me, I love beauty, by the way. If you took any of that away from me and you put me in a concrete block cell, I probably wouldn't last very long. Unless I could find something to color from within. What are your balance points? What do you love? Don't give those up. Find them again. And if we are depressed, we go, I feel apathy toward everything, right? But here's the thing. Go back to your preteen years. 12, 13, 14, 11 even. What were you interested in then? What just fascinated you? Go back and pick that up. So many times we don't go and do things because we're afraid of failing. Oh, I'm not going to be good at that. I say, paint the worst picture you ever painted. I say, write the worst book. I say, just turn on the faucet and let the brown water flow until it's clean. Come on. We're talking about your life here. And what you have within that often is buried under the brown water. Pursue your passions, but find out what they are first. Fill yourself up with what you love. At the end of my book, The Life You Want, I tell a story about my dad. My dad had dementia. He had serious dementia. But the interesting thing about him is he never forgot what he loved, not ever. First of all, he never forgot that my mother was passed. Not once did he forget that. He loved fried chicken. He loved me. He loved red hair. He loved singing. He loved music. There were things he loved until the moment he passed away. We don't forget what we love. The problem is sometimes people don't find what they love and don't let themselves have it. You see, you have a permission inside of you that you grant or you don't grant. And a lot of times in my work, I have the prettiest boy here. I don't know, you all are probably, you want to see another cat? This is Franz Joe. Hi, Franzie. And he's sweet. He's my really old kitty. He's got cancer and kidney disease, but boy, is he a wonderful kitty. Okay. All right. So you've got to give yourself permission to have what you enjoy, you see. I don't know why he's coming today, but he is. I love this. She says, practice mindfulness. And I guess you can practice mindfulness. I think that's always lovely to practice, but it's going to take practice. And really, it cannot be done until you get these knee-jerk reactions out of the way, because you're always going to go to that, you see, instead of the moment and the choices that you have in the moment. Her next one is reflect on your experiences. I know she means that well. Reflect on your experiences. Reflect on you. Thank you, Michelle. Reflect on your experiences. I see people not reflecting on their experiences, but many times indulging in their experiences and not moving on from their experiences. Now, there are fixations that really keep you locked in. Granted. But kids, we got to address those things. We got to release the energy from that. Then you won't start collecting everything that's happening in the present that fits that idea, that philosophy, an idea of self and the world and God and other people. Whoops, he's back. She says set goals. I think that's lovely. I think this goes back to creating the life you want. The book, Creating the Life You Want, has a lot about manifestation. In Creating the Life You Want, that first book I wrote, I want to say there are three main topics in that book. Number one, there is what God is. What God is. What God is, how it fits together with consciousness, what the whole kit and caboodle is about. What's God to you? Another topic is how to use that energy to create a wonderful life beyond what is already out there and being said. Third thing is ultimately this leads one day to spiritual surrender. It leads to spiritual surrender. And spiritual surrender, see, we're surrendering a lot in our lives. I mean, when I work with you, I certainly take the wrecking ball to the egoic child's mind structure. I take away certain bricks and mortar. And following week, you built it up again, but it's a little weaker, you see, until we can knock the whole ego child's mind down, and you don't need it anymore. You're living more and more and more in the energy of the highest self, which is marvelous. So we are trying to take the cognitive distortions, take the ideas of self that no longer serve you, the small self, by the way, ego child's mind, idea of self. And we're trying to get you past that to find out who you really are, because what you want to do in life, or what you should be doing right now, comes out of who you are, not the other way around. It comes out of who you are. So the more authentic you become, the more you have to offer in terms of real value to your friends and family and community in the world, the happier you'll be. And the more realistic goals you'll set for yourself. Because here she puts, set goals. And guys, if you are in the ego child's mind and you need to control your world, the only thing that's left for you to set goals through is fantasy. And fantasy has its own reward. These things cannot happen to you. Fantasy is set up so that you win the Oscar in your mind, but you're never going to take an acting class. Do you get it? It's just not going to serve you. If you're going to set goals, they have to be set realistically. You have to know more of who you are and what you want, and that may change. That may change for you. What do you want now? What do you want a year from now, and 5 years from now, and 10 years from now, when you're a whole new person with a whole new attitude about living and life and love? She goes on to say, use positive self-talk. Well, that's wonderful. I love these remarks that she's making. You don't even know, in our unawareness, the negative self-talk you're giving yourself. Nobody does. We don't catch all of those things. But smart people, guys, and there's proof of this in The Life You Want, the book that I just referred to, smart people think 1,000 thoughts an hour. What were the majority of those thoughts? If they were in any way negative, and here's a negative you don't think about. I should go to the gym. I should eat my breakfast. I should not have so many animals. I should go outside and work in the sunshine because I'm pasty. I should. Every time you use the word should that way, you're pulling yourself down. You're saying something's wrong with you. Shoulds are a cognitive distortion. Shoulds are terribly damaging, and yet we grew up with them. You should really do your homework now. You should spend more time on history than on the playground. You should clean your room. You should cut the grass. You should make more money. Guys, challenge yourself to get rid of those shoulds. Tell yourself the truth beyond them. Okay? I added one thing here about improving self-awareness, and that is realize that nothing is good or bad. It's your judgment of it that makes it good or bad. It's your judgment. And you learned judgment when you were a little girl and a little boy. Nothing's good or bad. Everything just is. I think that's a really good thing for you to wake up to ultimately, because when we are in that space, we surrender to God and just let God transform whatever is happening. Becky just said, bye-bye, shoulds. Thank you so much. Yeah, no shoulds. Okay. All right, so where's our time? We have 9 minutes. So we start on low emotional intelligence. This is an article by Isabel Tenorio. 10 subtle signs someone has low emotional intelligence. So let's start on that. And next week we'll finish this up with the 18 signs that you do have high emotional intelligence. So repeating myself here, emotional intelligence is the level of your ability to understand others and what motivates them, along with learning how to cooperate with them. I'm not real wild about that, because I think this has to do with learning how to cooperate with you and your highest self. I think that's the key. I think one of the most spiritual words in the world is cooperation. I think the whole universe cooperates with itself. I think when we see a lion on the veldt separating an antelope out of the herd and having it for dinner, I think there is a cooperation going on there that we don't understand. I think we all live and die in cooperation unless our ego child's mind gets in the way. I think people can linger on their deathbeds because they've never gotten any of this straight in them, and they're waiting for the ego to save them, the ego child's mind, and death is going to win. So why don't we get straight with it now, right? It's about getting straight with all of this in us. Having a great life, having a great death, all the same thing because it's all energy, you see. All right, so the signs of one thing that this article goes on to say that I want to take exception to too. You know me. She talks about reading people. And I don't think that's very emotionally intelligent. She's saying that emotional intelligence helps you read people better. I think emotional intelligence is about you reading yourself. In your understanding of yourself and your higher and lesser motivations and getting down to essentially who you are, I tell you what I think is born in you at that time. And that is a great compassion for other people and their struggle and what they're doing. I'd like you to entertain that thought, because this idea of reading other people is just bloomin' manipulation. I don't like it. I don't like the kinds of psychology that says, mirror what the other person is doing to get them to, be influenced by you. Guys, all of this is such manipulation. It's the manipulation of somebody that doesn't have any authenticity and personal power. You need to empower yourself with the truth. Being who you are is the truth. Doing the best you can in the moment, whatever that is the truth. So, just wanted to put that on the table. Spotting the signs of low emotional intelligence. We're going to talk a lot about these things because I agree with some of them and not with others. She said that holding grudges is a sign of low emotional intelligence. I think that's true. Holding grudges is a way to not open up the highest self. Why wouldn't you open up the highest self? Well, you've learned to avoid. You've learned not to forgive. You've learned to block off what bothers you. But it's going to be, until you talk about it, a burr under your saddle. And that's what a grudge is. Something that's always there. Something that's calling you to look at it. But what we do instead is we say, I don't want to look at that, because that's what we did when we were younger. We avoid, and we won't get it. We may say, oh, well, that's unresolvable. My mother or father or whoever I had trouble with is dead. And I say, but it's not, it's alive and well in you, whatever was wrong. It's not hurting them, hurting you. It was interesting because I think that our unforgiveness of ourselves and others is so painful that many people say, oh, I've forgiven them. And they really have not. They haven't at all. I think one of my dear friends who keeps trying to call me on the phone has forgotten I'm doing a radio show. Happens from time to time that somebody forgets. So that will stop ringing in a moment. Anyway, we can't avoid things. And grudges are a way we can tell that we are avoiding things. We're positioning ourselves against threats. Are there any real threats in the world? I think it all starts in our perception. And the people that I work with often see threats where there are no threats at all. I have a client right now who I find very dear. She's new. And she'll get an email from someone. It's a perfectly fine email. She takes offense with it. She sees that it's snippy. And I don't see that it's snippy at all. Our perceptions are everything. If our perceptions are incorrect based on knee-jerk reactions and old grudges we hold, which are fixations of energy back in the past somewhere around something that hurt us, we've got to address that. When we address it, when we talk about it, when we move the energy out, the experience becomes lighter and lighter because the fixation of energy isn't there anymore, and ultimately it goes away. I get real tickled. I coach a lot of corporate people to go into their corporate situations and handle very difficult problems. And they're nervous and they're freaked out, and I work with them and they're just scared to death, and they go in and I always say, call me afterwards, let me know how it went, knowing perfectly well how it's going to go. And they never call. And so in our next session, I say, okay, what happened? Oh, piece of cake. No problem.
90 seconds.
No problem. So they never remember it was no problem. There's no reason to call, right? And of course, I'm telling the call because I want them to say, I saw there was no problem. Okay. Nobody ever does that. Guys, we're going to stop there because I've just gotten 90 seconds. We're going to start back next week with what we're talking about right now, which is low emotional intelligence, and then we're going to talk about high emotional intelligence.
60 seconds.
Guys, thank you so much for listening. Dear God, we appreciate all of this. Thank you so much. And we offer these things that we can surrender now to you. And in place of these things, the deepening of us is love, and our authenticity is you. Thank you so much. And so it is. And guys, I want to thank you very much for getting the word around about this show. Please send it to all your friends on social media that might be interested, and send it to, and by word of mouth too. That means a lot. Thank you, Denise. Thank you so much, Becky. You all are just adorable, and I love working with you. And we'll have a good time next week as well. Okay? God bless you all. Take care. Bye-bye.